Welcome to What We See, conversations across indie education with microschools, homeschool families, and hybrid programs about what they're actually doing, how they know it's working, and what the metrics miss. All right. So we're going to start from the top here with Sarah Lavezzo and Lauren Yacht from Scholé Education Center, Center for Innovative Education. Amazing. Thanks so much for joining me again, Sarah and Lauren. Can we just start the conversation here by telling me, about yourselves, what you're building, how you got here?
Sure. So we are a hybrid micro school. We serve homeschooled students ages K through 8 or grades K through 8, and we are adding high school next year. It's kind of like part-time school. Kids come to our campus Tuesdays and Thursdays for classes, and then we do field trips in the area on Fridays. We live in the Northern Virginia area, pretty close to DC. And how we got started was kind of a story of chance meeting via a Facebook group. Sarah and I had both previously lived in this area and we're moving back. And we were looking for a similar type of program, I guess, for our own students, our own children, and didn't really find what we were looking for. And so I had reached out on Facebook to see if anybody would be interested in potentially starting something. And Sarah had started a school previously in a different state, and we connected and everything kind of went from there. We ended up moving back here in the exact same time frame, exact same city. So it all was kind of meant to be.
Very cool.
Yes.
Anything you want to add, Sarah, or does that complete the story for you?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
When Lauren and I were chatting, we talked on Zoom for like 3 hours, and I came upstairs and my husband looked at me and he basically said, "Okay, it looks like you're starting another school," because he could tell that such a long conversation equaled. We must have had a lot in common.
I mean, my two favorites in my phone on my text are my husband and you, Sarah. So
same. And our husbands often joke that we text each other more than.
So that's okay. A little off script for me a little bit here, but I'm just curious then, because you mentioned that it sounds like your partnership is what sparked this for you, and then also is a big part of what's grounding it. So is there anything you guys want to say about your partnership in terms of how you complement each other? Often it's like someone brings something that the other person doesn't have and needs, and vice versa. And there's, what's that dynamic like?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest benefit is we have a strong friendship built on trust and respect for each other. So that helps a lot. Lauren is excellent at all things, but she's exceptionally good at the administrative side of things. She's a great public speaker. She has a lot of knowledge about the educational needs of our students, as well as curriculum and everything like that. I more focus on the educational and teaching side of things, but it really is a partnership. We have our own domains that we really lead, but we talk about everything and make decisions together.
There's a lot of overlap there. I think I'll echo what Sarah says, is just being really good friends first. I mean, definitely our friendship evolved as our partnership evolved, since we got to know each other through the process of starting this business, but at the same time, have become really close because of it. And I think, sometimes it's actually really surprising to me how well things work. It feels like we're two halves of one brain sometimes. And Sarah really brings a lot of educational expertise to our program, and really being able to map things out strategically in a way that makes it really easy for us to know curriculum-wise where we're headed, and anticipate the needs of our students and our teachers and our families in a way that makes it really easy to do the administrative side without worrying as much about, okay, well, what curriculum are we using for science next year? She's very good at predicting that. And, I think it's interesting because as you said, kind of where one person is strong, the other person might need that push in that area. And so, I think that we see that a lot in our dynamic, where it's where one of us might not be as comfortable, the other one's like, oh, okay, I can step in and do that. And or where one of us is unsure, the other one's really confident. So it really helps to have a partner. We both say that it would be really, really difficult to do this without a partner. Just even someone to vent to.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's so much that goes into it, from the education, working with the kids, the planning, the business side, the administrative side. So having someone that feels like you can trust them to hold these domains that to you seem scary and foreign, while you hold the ones that feel natural and like they're part of your, like what, stepping into your power and being able to trust the other person or people,
Mm-hmm.
obviously essential in like lots of partnerships, businesses or whatever, but in something as complex as running a school or a learning environment like this, it's really
Yeah.
important. So, all right, so I want to get into like what learning looks like in your, in your program, in your environment. So, like, walk me through. It's 2 days a week, Tuesdays and what,
Tuesday,
Wednesdays you
Thursday.
said, and then Fridays,
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, Thursday, and then a Friday family
Yeah.
field trip option. So if I walk in on a Tuesday morning to Scholé Center, like what am I seeing?
Yeah. I mean, this at the start of the day, we have our students coming in, playing on the playground, greeting their friends. They're all just really excited to be at school, as are the teachers and staff, and the families are talking to each other. We have a really strong community of families as well, which I think is the heartbeat of our program. So before the day even gets started, all of the kids feel seen and cared for and ready to start their
Yeah.
day.
And then every day is different. And I think that's what is so fun about programs like this is I was telling a tour today that we were going to observe science classes and I had no idea what to expect. I don't teach science. And so I know the general topic they're learning, but I don't know what experiment they're going to be doing that day or what they're going to be talking about. And so, today I walked in on a variety of different projects that were happening. And the best part is that when I walk in there, and I say, what are you guys doing today? They can all explain what they're doing. And I might have no idea what, they were working on one of our classes today. They were making they were emulating microplastic by putting this kind of slurry together and then they had to go heat it up. And they said it's going to harden, it's going to be so cool. And I mean, I would have never thought that that's what they were working on. So it was just, it's fun that every day looks different. Every class looks different. It's very dynamic. So you'll see students up and moving around. You'll see them interacting in groups. It might be a little noisy. They're excited to work together. They're excited, especially when they're working on projects and they have kind of like a breakthrough or they observe something exciting in a science experiment. There might be cheering or, kind of helping each other. So there's a lot of collaboration. And I think that's one of the things that makes our program unique is just that it's highly collaborative. The environment is very dynamic. So there's a lot of just change and flux throughout the day. And I think that's part of why our students stay engaged in what they're doing. Because, if I knew what I was going to do every single day when I walked into work, it would probably be a little predictable and maybe a little boring. And I imagine our students feel the same way about walking into class. They're probably just as excited to figure out what that day is going to bring as we are.
Cool. So it's a good segue into the next question I have, because it's maybe answers part of it or touches on it, but like, how would you, what's something about learning, about how learning happens in your environment that would probably surprise somebody who's only really had an experience with conventional schooling?
I think the student ownership over their work is really different. They are so passionate about what they're learning. We might be getting into this later, but we do mastery-based progress reports. So they're not, especially at the elementary level, they're not working for a traditional grade. So one might think then maybe they're disengaged or they're not working hard, but they are so passionate about what they're learning that they are putting in their best effort every single day. And they take ownership over the academics, but also like the older students helping younger students on the playground or giving them attention and helping to kind of mentor them, ownership over our service projects that we do that are really involved, ownership over our school play, which the students write and produce and create the props and costumes and all of that. So it looks I have compared it before to, my husband is in the tech industry, and I've kind of compared it to like a startup. It is that dynamic environment that Lauren is talking about, but in a way that kids are really inspired to learn and be there, and they care so much about what they're doing, and they care a lot about each other.
Yeah, like there's so much when I heard the ownership piece, and then when you talk about like the school play, but like not just putting on a play that someone else picked for you and is directing for you and handing you all the process, but like when you own the process, how
Yeah.
much the learning transcends any one subject or skill, but is this kind of like holistic process where you have the opportunity to be learning so many different things, skills, subjects or whatever is like I think something that's very unique to environments like yours where it's smaller, the kids have more ownership, the experience is much more, I don't know, based in a real experience that they're having rather than something that's being just kind of given to them. Um, what would you say is a gap that might exist between how like the outside world or conventional education or how we're kind of typically see how education measures how a kid is like doing well
Mm.
versus like how you witness whether or not a kid is doing well or
I think my simplest answer for that is, does the student still care about what they're learning? Do they still want to know more? Are they excited? Are they curious? They could have all A's, let's say, if we're talking about a traditional grading system, but do they do they care? Do they want to extend their knowledge? And I think that intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation that Sarah was talking about is when kids are intrinsically motivated, the progress is inherently there in a way because they're going to continue to learn and they're going to continue to work on their mastery of the subject. And if they want to know more, they will know more. Whereas if you have a different type of system where they're really just kind of going for an achievement, once that achievement is unlocked, where is the motivation to continue? And so I think that's hard to measure, right? It's hard to measure intrinsic motivation, but I think when you're interacting with students who want to be there and who want to learn and who want to read about the subject and who ask questions and are just kind of endlessly curious. I mean, we could spend the subjects go so fast. We could spend all day long in social studies or all day long in science, and it would just keep going. It would take a really long time for them to exhaust their interest. And so, I think that is one important way to measure progress that is missed in a lot of traditional environments.
yeah, for sure.
Mm.
So maybe pulling on that thread like a little bit more and take a minute if you need to like think about it. But like, can you recall a moment where you witnessed, growth in a kid that a test score or a grade would never be able to capture, but actually represented like, oh, like this is why we do this work, and this is like
I wonder if we're
what's
going to come up
incredible
with the same
about
story.
what happens
I
here.
Okay.
I have two.
Okay.
Um, so both with middle school boys, actually. we I work a lot with our middle schoolers, and we have a student who is awesome and passionate and all of these great things, but sometimes, middle schoolers, it can be hard to pull out that passion. And every year we do a service project that is tied to this global competition that kids pick a UN Sustainable Development Goal and create a project around it. They have to present to judges and all these sorts of things. And we have a student who just like rocks it every year, putting so much into it. And you can just see it combines all of these things that just make him come alive. And he takes leadership roles and pushes everybody further to think bigger than what they were originally thinking. And so that's so cool to see because you can tell when kids really find something they're good at and passionate about. When those things all align, it's a really magical moment as a teacher. Yeah, so that was a long answer. So I'll save the second one
I feel
for
like I
another
have the
time.
same. I probably have your second story. And I wasn't even the teacher in this class. I was sitting in the room, and it's another middle school boy story. And I think, forgive me for being so
Yes, this is the same
stereotypical
story.
here, but I feel like middle school boys are a great population for evaluating the level of like interest in education because I think that we tend to see that particular population as pulling out or disengaging from the educational environment often in a traditional environment. And so I was sitting in a class with, it was a writing class, and there was one of our older middle school boys, and he's been with us for several years. He's a delightful, quirky kid. Writing is not his favorite subject, and he's a little reticent to put himself out there, put his thoughts out there on paper. And a man of few words, if you will. And they were doing a poetry unit, and he read a poem that he wrote, and it was one of the most beautiful things I have ever heard a child write. It was just magical. And I've actually taught this student writing for one of the years, and then Sarah has taught him writing one of the years, and just witnessing not only his progress as a writer, but just his vulnerability. And he read it in front of his classmates, who all gave him amazing praise for it. No one was, oh, that's so silly that you wrote that, or, it just, the vulnerability and sharing in a place where he wasn't confident and found this success and this voice. It was just a really beautiful moment to witness. And I think made him maybe see himself differently. Like, maybe I am a writer. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I do have this voice. And so, I think that those little bricks of, confidence or experience that students experience throughout our program, or any program that's kind of supports them in this way, builds a house, that a strong foundation for their future, where they can kind of reflect back to that. Oh, that was hard for me, but I had this moment where I was supported, and I succeeded in a way that was meaningful to me, and not just by someone else's standard.
Yeah, and like I think so much about how that situation only is possible because of the relationships and trust
Mm-hmm.
and culture of your
Mm-hmm.
environment, and how that kid feels, you know, comfortable to be themselves and in relationship with the adults and the kids. And the medium of learning there is about exploration and curiosity and growing, and not about social comparison and competing and ranking and sorting. Like, that environment allows that to happen. And that's such a big part of, I think, what you guys are doing, what a lot of people are doing in this space, is creating an environment where kids can actually be comfortable, seen, and so then this type of real learning actually gets to come out, rather than just like, we got 15, 30 kids in a room and we all went through the curriculum and congratulations. But like, for a kid to be able to write a poem and then share it and then just like live into that experience. Yeah, like that's, I don't think
Yeah.
we think enough about the conditions that are
Yeah.
necessary for the kind of fertile soil for something like that to happen. And that
Yeah.
that is actually, what has to, that tilling that soil, creating that environment is
Yeah.
required as the educational practitioners.
Yeah. If I can interject a follow up, because we are
Yeah.
revisiting poetry this week in this class, all of the kids were so inspired by him. Like, their assignment was to find a piece of art in the National Gallery and write a poem inspired by it. And like, they were all like, look, like, they seriously, all of them were like, I think my poem's as good as so and so's poem. And like, he inspired them to try really hard at this thing that none of them were really comfortable about. And yes, his next poem was epic as well.
I
So
think your point
it's
about
a fun.
relationship in programs that are maybe smaller, or maybe multi-year, with a similar teacher, similar group of peers, it allows for this risk taking that I think is hard to do in, gosh, even when you're an adult and you don't feel confident around the people you're with, that, how are they going to react? Can I trust that they're going to receive this, or is everyone going to laugh at me? Is everyone going to think less of me? And so when you have that foundation of, everyone here is wants me to succeed, wants me to take risks, and they're going to be here for me if things don't go well. I think that just creating an environment where risk taking is encouraged by the way you react if it doesn't work out, and the idea of like this growth mindset and trying again, and it being a safe thing to do. And it's not, oh well, you failed that assignment, so where's your motivation to try again there? when we're not
Yeah.
ranking them on how well did you do, but even if that kid's poem wasn't a great poem, the idea
Right.
of taking that
It's
step,
like
like you
that's
have
not the
made
point.
progress. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like you're engaged
Yeah.
in something real and
Mhm.
meaningful that's like connected to who you are as a person, and you're not just doing this thing that has been
Yeah.
laid out for you. Yeah, and like, when you said like about like taking a risk to succeed, there's also this element of like being able to define for yourself what success means, right? Like when that's not also just someone else's standard for you, but it's a collaboration and a conversation and kind of an emergent experience rather than like a carrot that's being dangled in front of you. So you might have already answered. Well, you have some examples that maybe touch on this, but like maybe two more questions here for you. Like, what's something we hear a lot in conventional schools, like the idea of rigor. Personally, it's a bit triggering for me because, well, I don't want to answer the question for you, but I'll say when you hear the word like rigor or what gets called rigor in conventional schools, like is there something that you would say like that gets called rigor in conventional schools that maybe isn't actually rigorous? And what do you see in your learning environment that is rigorous but maybe wouldn't get called that?
It's a great question. um Sarah, do you have
Um,
you look like you have an answer on the tip of your tongue, so.
well, I would say like also don't love the word, but I would say students engaging around complex texts or ideas or conversations and doing so respectfully and with deep thoughts and ideas and being willing to take risks with those things. I that to me kind of epitomizes rigor in that they're able to do these hard things that, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of times the world will be like, oh, you can't do that, but they can. Like a they can do important things now. And that might look like the service projects or the play that we do or the high level work that we ask of them to accomplish. But it's meaningful, I think. So like I would say rigor translates into meaningful work that challenges and grows our students.
Yeah, and kind of harkens back to what you were saying about ownership at the beginning too. It's like, you can I think the way it gets talked about in conventional schools, people want adults feel good if we're making them do hard work and we can like look they're doing hard work, but like to the degree that it's not work that they feel ownership over or that is actually integrated as theirs, you know, it's really
Right.
for the adults to feel better about it, right? Versus like this kind of a messier stuff that's more complex that requires responsibility and ownership and like, seeing something through, not knowing necessarily where it's going, but sticking with it. Cool. Well, this has been
Yeah.
awesome. I guess we'll close maybe with one more question that's a little more forward looking. I guess, yeah. What would you say the world needs to understand about how kids actually learn?
Mhm. That's a big question.
It's a big one.
Let them do
Yeah.
things. Let them try stuff.
Let them
Pretty
do
much
things.
everything that you observe in a child 5 and under is like what a kid needs until they're like 18. So kids, I have three going on 4 kids, so I've had lots of kids, and they naturally explore the world around them. They naturally want to experiment. They naturally want to try things and take risks and succeed or fail and adjust. And I think when we don't take that opportunity away from them, they just keep doing that. And they just keep doing that at bigger and bigger levels and deeper levels. And, it goes from I'm going to try and do these monkey bars that are really high off the ground to like, I'm going to write this poem and read it in front of my friends and see how they react. That's just a different type of risk. Same thing with, kind of going back to your last question a little bit, like rigor, kids given like this, to use a Charlotte Masony term, like a feast of ideas or information. It's amazing that the connections they can draw between them when you don't stand in their way by kind of forcing them to learn a certain thing about it. Like okay, we're going to learn history and you have to memorize these dates and these people, and, having these big conversations about, what do you notice? What themes do you see this year in history that we're studying, or, these events that we're studying, or these scientific discoveries, or, do you see that in art? Do you see that in music? Do you see it in science? Like, what connections do you see across the big picture? I think when we don't stand in their way and we let them play, not only with, the world around them and different experiences, but also with the information itself, we get so much more out of them. Not that we're trying to get things out of them, but they, get it out of themselves. And it's always there. But
Right.
when I think we stand in their way, when we require knowledge to look a certain way, or learning to look a certain way, or proof of knowledge to look a certain way.
I think too, just like leaning into their natural, well, you kind of touched on this, Lauren, but their natural curiosity and capabilities. Like all of our students are unique and have their own special strengths and ways that they need to grow. I was talking with a parent recently who their child is a newer student to our program, and she was comparing what was happening in school before and now, and how her child is just completely changed and different. Like that spark is back. And I think, like, if nothing else, like encouraging that spark is so important, because that's something that sticks with you for life and is really so integral to not only success but happiness. And obviously kids need to be uncomfortable sometimes and do things they don't want to do, but for the most part, like we want kids, like, doesn't every parent want that for their child, for them to be curious and happy and engaging with the world? And like I just see that, like, I've been at this for nearly 10 years, and probably you can say this too, you've been at it longer than me, that the magic and joy and spark of these kids is incredible. And they are just such good kids and young people that really want to make a difference in the lives of the people around them and their world. And this type of learning really empowers them to do that.
Awesome. All right. Well, so many things that I want to say that I don't need to, because you've both said them in those answers. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Sarah and Lauren from Scholé Center. I really appreciate you joining me and sharing more about who you are and what you're doing and how learning looks in the spaces you're facilitating and educating in. And yeah, thanks again so much for coming.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having us.